Hello fellow peacemakers, it's your host Lily. Welcome back to episode 47 of Make Peace Not Beef. So recently my good friend and former guest on the show, Alicia, messaged me and she requested me to do an episode on whether or not we're currently going through the 6th mass extinction. What exactly that entails? Will humans become extinct? And whether or not we can do anything to reverse or mitigate the extinction. So quickly for context, if you haven't been following the news lately, scientists have declared that we're officially in the 6th mass extinction and it's virtually irrevocable. Yay! What a dreary news to wake up to and discuss on a podcast. Yikes. And as you know, I usually like to keep things a little bit more lighthearted or at least neutral on my podcast, and I tend to steer away from anything doom and gloom or remotely related to the Armageddon. I actually have this irrational fear of apocalypse or dystopia, and also just dystopian fiction in general, which is why for many years I avoided Margaret Atwood's novels like the plague. But ironically enough, recently I decided to pick up a copy of Oryx and Crake at the used bookstore, and I'm actually going to read it. Because, sometimes in life, you just have to confront your fears. But no, I still refuse to watch horror movies, so I will not watch Saw, thank you very much. Anyway, I've gone off of a tangent. So back to the 6th mass extinction. Honestly, I just recently read about the 6th mass extinction in the news as well. And I think it's important to talk about it, specifically on my podcast in the context of climate change and what's happening to our planet and humanity. So I'll brief you a little bit on the history of mass extinctions. Then I'll give you my 2 cents on the current situation and contextualize how that might impact us as a species. Okay, so to give you some context for today's episode, let's first start with some quick facts and history of the Earth. Gonna put on my National Geographic voice, which happens to sound exactly the same as my Make Peace Not Beef voice. So, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. And life started on Earth roughly 3.7 billion years ago. Now, in the past 500 million years or so, the Earth had undergone 5 mass extinctions. And what is a mass extinction? Let's just define the term here. So, a mass extinction takes place when at least 75% of the species on Earth are wiped out in a very short amount of time. And by short, we're talking about 2 million years. So, not at all short relative to the human lifespan, but short compared to Earth's chronology and geological eras. And 99.9% of all species that have ever existed on the Earth are now extinct. Unsurprisingly, right? And who knows, maybe humans will just be a blip in the cosmos at the end of the day. We'll find out. But anyway, let's take a look at the past 5 mass extinctions that have taken place so far. So the first mass extinction was the ordovician-silurian extinction that took place 440 million years ago. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But basically, during the first mass extinction, 440 million years ago, a bunch of small marine organisms, like corals and some other invertebrates, were wiped out, possibly due to glaciation and anoxia, which basically means the lack of oxygen in the ocean. And remember that life on Earth started in the ocean, right? So unsurprisingly, the extinction mostly involved marine species. Now, the second mass extinction was the Devonian extinction that took place 365 million years ago, and a bunch of tropical marine species were wiped out. The third mass extinction, the permian-triassic mass extinction, took place 250 million years ago, which was the largest recorded mass extinction in the history of our planet. And it resulted in the disappearance of 96% of marine life and 70% of terrestrial life. And this extinction is often referred to as the Great Dying. Sounds like the title of a chapter straight out of Shakespeare's plays, The Great Dying. Anyway, so at that time, right, the world was still a Pangea in the form of a supercontinent. And so in that extinction, some early dinosaurs were killed, and the corals were once again severely affected, and it took them another millions of years to reconstruct their former glory. Poor corals. But I swear, Corals are like the undead in the history of mass extinction, right? They keep getting wiped out with every extinction, but they keep getting resurrected throughout the history of the planet. But it just takes them millions of years for them to make their comeback each time. They're like the most patient and stubborn species ever. And after that, the fourth mass extinction is the Triassic-Jurassic extinction, which took place 201 million years ago. And as you can tell from the name, Triassic-Jurassic extinction involved the demise of many dinosaurs and pterosaurs, who once reigned our planet. And by the way, pterosaurs or pterodactyls, spelled Pterosaurs, are basically just flying dinosaurs. Pretty cool, right? Like straight out of one of those like movies you see, like Jurassic Park. But lastly, around 65 million years ago, the fifth mass extinction took place, and this one is famously known as the KT extinction that purged almost all the dinosaurs like T-Rex and a bunch of other marine invertebrates. Now, the cause of the last and fifth extinction has been shrouded in mystery for many years, and there's different conspiracy theories, including cosmic radiation from a nearby supernova explosion. But the most widely accepted theory that accounts for the last mass extinction was that there was a massive comet or asteroid that impacted the Earth and wiped out the majority of species. So, goodbye dinosaurs. And then 200,000 years ago, humans appeared in the geological record as Homo sapiens, and here we are. But humans, don't get proud now. We haven't been around for a long time compared to some of the other species on Earth that have long predated us and survived evolution. So, fun fact, jellyfishes have been around for 500 million years, and horseshoe crabs, believe it or not, have been around for 445 million years. That's a long ass time. Meanwhile, humans have only been around for 200,000 years. Weak. Anyway, I'm going to stop here before my podcast turns into National Geographic. So, back to the topic of discussion for today. According to the latest findings by scientists, or at least purported findings in the news, we are now going through the sixth mass extinction. And unlike the previous 5, this one is entirely human-caused. And apparently, we've already lost somewhere between 7 to 13% of all the species so far, which is pretty rapid compared to on a span of 2 million years, we've already lost like over 10%. It's happening pretty rapidly. But let's think critically for a second before we get carried away by the media and its fear-mongering language. And I've done some research to help you assess the case at hand. So when exactly did the sixth mass extinction start? And what caused it? Did it start in 2020 with the global pandemic and lockdown? Or before that, with dot-com burst in 2000? Or did it start back in 1760 with the Industrial Revolution? Actually, the answer is the sixth mass extinction started way before all of that, way before that. It actually started around 100,000 years ago, when humans first decided to migrate out of Africa to disperse themselves across the world and modify the face of the planet through hunting, domestication of fire, leaving trails of ecological damage wherever we touched. But the more aggressive phase of the sixth mass extinction probably started around 10,000 years ago with the advent of agriculture, where we basically domesticated and manipulated a bunch of other species for our own gains and survival, irreversibly disrupting the delicate balance of the ecosystem. And the human population began to soar at that point and overpopulate as a result. Now, this was the beginning of the Anthropocene, which eventually paved its way for our extraction and burning of fossil fuels and climate change, leading to the situation we find ourselves in today. So, if the sixth mass extinction started 100,000 years ago, why are we suddenly reading about it in the news today? Well, my conjecture is that it has to do with the accelerated pace at which the extinction is now unfolding. So before, it was probably happening at a gradual and slow pace. And now, with climate change and energy use and population growth, everything is expedited and probably happening at an exponential pace. And scientists fear that we're near the point of no return, which is why we're suddenly seeing these headlines now. So now, these extinction headlines are surfacing not to convey any new scientific discoveries, but rather to serve as a reminder of the urgency of the situation we're already in. And if you ask me, am I really surprised that we're in the 6th mass extinction? Absolutely not. Am I surprised by the scale and velocity at which extinction is unfolding? No. I mean, look at the 3 billion animals that were killed and displaced by the Australian bushfires back in 2020. Like, did that not sound the alarm for emergency and extinction? I mean, were all those documentaries by David Attenborough not compelling enough for us to wake up to this crisis? But again, I think the media is just experimenting with different headlines and various ways of conveying the gravity and scale of human-caused climate change. I mean, you gotta do whatever you can to get people engaged in the matter. But also, more importantly for media companies, attention-grabbing headlines help them garner those extra revenues through ads. What do I think about this whole situation around the 6th mass extinction? Well, that's just another fancy way of reporting the impact of climate change. So, nothing new for me really. And how serious is climate change? Well, I have a whole podcast dedicated to it, so I think the answer is crystal clear. It's very serious. Anyway, the good news is the vast majority of the extinction is not going to happen in your lifetime, Peacemaker, which means you're probably safe for now. Well, depending on how bad climate change gets by the end of the century. It's kind of a blessing and a curse that humans don't live forever right now, so we don't have to see the end of times. But also, the brevity of life is precisely what gives our existence meaning, right? Hashtag existentialism. Anyway, before I digress again, the key thing to note here, though, is that the 6th mass extinction is almost entirely human-caused, which is a double-edged sword if you think about it. It means we have the power to reverse it, but we also have the power to accelerate it, and the fate of our own survival or extinction is kind of left up to us and the course of action we take, which kind of places a lot of responsibility on us as a species. It's like exercising collective existentialism on a species level. Like, what will we do as a civilization? We could either be the savior of our planet, or we could be the destroyer, and along ourselves, drag millions of other species with us to the grave. Now, on a more philosophical level, if you zoom out a little bit, there's this concept of the Great Filter, and funny enough, Elon Musk always talks about it in his interviews nowadays. But anyway, the Great Filter is this theory that Robin Hanson came up with, I believe, like maybe 6 or 7 decades ago. Maybe not that long ago, maybe like a few decades ago. But anyway, it's this theory that for every intelligent and advanced civilization that evolves in the universe, there will eventually be some kind of insurmountable barrier or hurdle that's impossible to overcome, which causes the intelligent civilization to disappear. Which explains why we haven't found evidence of life or traces of aliens elsewhere in the universe, other than those, unverified leaked tapes or rare footage of UFOs on YouTube. And the Great Filter might not even be some natural cataclysm. It could just be some inevitable path to self-destruction, like AI or climate change, or some common technology and energy problem that every intelligent civilization eventually comes across and likely fails to find an adequate long-term solution to, and therefore become obsolete. It's like this ultimate challenge for every intelligent civilization in the universe, and if you fail to pass the Great Filter, you will perish forever. Kind of cool to think about it, but also extremely scary, daunting, and overwhelming at the same time. But more mind-bendingly, who's to say that we aren't all living in a massive simulation? Anyway, so the moral of the story is, you don't need to be alarmed by the news articles that talk about the 6th mass extinction. It's just another way to paraphrase the impact of climate change, how I see it. Anyway, that's just what it is. And it's saying humans should rethink the way we live and organize ourselves on this planet, and the way we're currently going about things and the way we're currently consuming energy and extracting resources is unsustainable. So really, nothing new. Essentially, it boils down to 2 things, right? Curbing greediness and overpopulation. I think those are the 2 main challenges confronting humanity right now. And climate change and the 6th mass extinction is just manifesting as a result of that. And I believe there are 2 solutions to surviving the climate apocalypse, right? There's a masculine solution and there's a feminine solution. And I've talked about this before. Wait, I haven't. I think I just tweeted about this once, and then I deleted my tweet because I felt stupid for tweeting. Anyway, so the masculine solution is basically Elon Musk's approach. It basically talks about how humans need to beef up our technology to become an interplanetary species. We gotta terraform Mars ASAP and colonize other planets before we're completely decimated by climate change. We gotta outsource our energy production centers to other planets as to solve the greenhouse effect conundrum to keep our planet cool and habitable. Basically, copy and paste our ruthless domination and endless extraction elsewhere in space. Now, the other solution, the feminine solution, is a more compassionate one, but I guess less timely. It basically says, let's figure out how to sustain ourselves on Earth and be able to extract resources at a rate less than or equal to the rate at which we restore them before we try to overtake other planets and exhaust their resources as well and repeat this vicious cycle elsewhere in the galaxy. So for me, I think we need to explore both approaches at the same time. And to be honest, I think human nature will probably be our own greatest downfall, aka the Great Filter. So unfortunately, as much as I want to rehabilitate our relationship with the planet, through our diet and lifestyle and interactions with other species, and I'm doing my best to spread the message on my podcast, but from a practical standpoint, I recognize our intrinsic selfishness as a species, and I do think interplanetary colonization will likely end up happening because it's more in accordance with our greedy nature. But at the same time, I do hope the feminine perspective gains traction and propel our civilization to evolve past greediness and selfishness and be able to practice compassion and cooperation on a meaningful scale. I've thought extensively about human nature, and I'm not convinced the way we are is set in stone. I think in the early days of the human race, competitiveness and greediness was a trait that was favored by evolution because if you think about it, right, in our ancestors' hunter and forager days, that's how you can increase your chances of survival as an individual in the wild. Like, if you come across a thicket of blackberries, you better forage and eat it all before someone else does. But now that the human race has scattered across the globe and expanded to its current size, connected by the internet and reliant on a global economy that hinges on trade and specialization, even the economist Adam Smith posited the division of labor when he published the book The Wealth of Nations back in 1776. I think more so than ever, we need to learn to cooperate with each other in order to ensure our collective survival, whether it be for each country to uphold its commitments in slashing emissions as part of the Paris Agreement, or keeping each country's population growth in check, or for developed countries to help developing countries build clean energy infrastructure and food systems that will pave the way for sustainable development. And for any of the non-vegans who are listening, I'm not even talking about animal agriculture and animal welfare here, but just purely coming at it from the selfish angle of self-preservation of the human race alone. I think being kind and considerate to one another will better our own chances of survival. And that means not being as greedy with our consumption and thinking about long-term resource regeneration instead of short-term resource extraction. And if we can extend that compassionate mindset to other animals in nature, then we will find ourselves at peace and harmony with our planet and its delicate ecosystem. And the payoff will be infinite. We get to not only survive the 6th mass extinction, save millions of other innocent species whose survival we depend on, but thrive on this beautiful planet that we call home.